Hi everyone, it's Gavin J, the best thing since the colour pink. And you're listening to Therapy Suite right here on UK Health Radio, the world's #1 talk health radio. This week I speak to Ruth Huges, who's a psychology expert and professor of science and well-being. We talk about how she helps people day to day. Ruth, welcome to the show. How you doing?
I'm fine, thank you, Gavin. Thanks so much for inviting me today.
It's a pleasure, and I think it's going to be brilliant because, you do so much. Talk to us about what you've done. How you got to where you are today and what you've done in the past and that kind of thing. Really interested to hear this.
Okay, well, I suppose it's a balance between saying yes to things when people have asked me and working hard, being in the right place at the right time. I've been in the field of positive psychology and coaching psychology all over the world. So I spent 11 years teaching in Zambia. I came from an educational and voluntary sector background. I'd done some senior leadership. I'd worked in marketing and admissions. And were working in international environments who'd moved from one place to another. And a lot of the organizations that wanted to support them didn't really understand the concept of culture shock. And then there was a huge focus on supporting mental health, but it seemed to me to be really focusing on what was wrong with people. And so teaching staff were getting a lot of training in how to be aware of mental ill health, but then essentially being told to refer people to specialist support services because they were frightened of doing something wrong. So when I came across positive psychology, which is the science of what's right with people, and has so many strategies about how I could combine this with an understanding of culture shock and help people through times of change in their life, help people become braver, help people take action, and help people, whether they're students or whether they're professionals who've moved into an environment that they're unfamiliar with, really understand, A, what's happening in terms of psychology, and B, what they can do about it themselves. And then also I wanted to work with the people who support people in change and give them some help and training. So, yeah, I think because I'd undergone culture shock myself, it was such a big move for me to go from the UK and live in Zambia. And then I spent, after I came back to the UK, I spent another 11 years supporting predominantly young people in culture shock themselves. I really wanted to train and find out how I could use an evidence-based scientific approach, but one that people could use and put into practice in their own lives. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. It does. Yeah, absolutely, 100%. I like the fact that you went abroad as well, and you practiced abroad. So you're kind of global. You're kind of international, aren't you? So
yeah,
I thought you were going to say something there for a minute. Sorry.
What did you think I was going to say, Gavin?
I wasn't sure. I thought I was just waiting for something. I don't know. Would you consider going abroad again at all?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I spent 5 years in one of my previous roles doing international recruitment. So I was traveling to about 5 different countries a year, looking at schools basically and meeting with parents and talking with people who were considering sending their children overseas to study. So I did an awful lot of traveling, but I still speak at international conferences. I've spoken at the ISEF conference in Berlin, again on positive psychology, wellbeing for international students. And I'm about to speak at an international language conference in Paris on June the 10th, also on positive psychology of a coaching approach in the classroom for ILCA, which is the International Language Coaching Association. So that's going to be on the weekend of the 15th and 16th of June. Definitely. But mostly my international work is done online. So I'm speaking with people from all over the world. I coach leaders in different countries, particularly in education and voluntary companies, but anyone who's working in a global environment. So even people who are in their own home country, but they're working with people from different countries, from different cultures. I do a lot of work in that area too.
That's fantastic. That's really impressive, honestly. You do so much abroad as well as the UK. You're kind of, and that's what I mean. You're kind of international, aren't you? You're global, basically, in what you do.
Yeah, I think so.
And you've been to your director of coaching certificate program at Cambridge University. That's my understanding, as well as professor of the science of well-being as well, and a research supervisor as well. Is that correct?
Yeah, that's right. So I'm the course director of the coaching certificate program at Cambridge University. So I have the privilege of working with a great team under the direction of the academic director of coaching, Jill Stevens. Cambridge offers a diploma and a master's, but also an entry-level certificate into coaching. So that's the course that I run. I'm not a full professor. I'm an adjunct professor with the American Institute for Foreign Studies, which is accredited by Fairfield University in the United States, but is based in Kensington, South London. So there I run the module on the psychological science of well-being for American undergraduate students. And the MAPCP at the University of East London was where I did my training. So MAPCP stands for Masters in Applied Positive Psychology and Coaching Psychology. And I taught on that program for a couple of years after I graduated. And now I'm really happy to go back and support students who are writing their research dissertations and just keep up to date with my own learning. But I think it's that balance, having the understanding of what the research tells us about what works when helping support people through change, really having that understanding. And so when I teach it, I need to be up to date with what's going on in the research world. And also I get to use it in practice. So when people come to me, when they've got changes about to happen in their lives, when they want to know what they can do when they've made a change, when they're struggling to cope, I've got quite a lot of tools and strategies in my toolkit that I can use to help them basically take action and be brave at those times when it feels like things might be falling apart a little bit.
Oh, I think people must definitely find that useful. Talk to us a bit more and a bit more of an explanation around positive psychology and what it is.
Okay, so positive psychology has been around for a while, but it really took off in 1998 when Martin Seligman gave a speech. He was the president of the American Psychological Association in that year. And he essentially put out a call to action to psychologists. He said, for far too long, psychologists have been focused on the science of what's wrong with people. And we've done a great job at that. We're really good at helping people who are struggling, people with diagnosable conditions, and people who are languishing, who are not doing well. And we've got all these things, all these tools to help them improve. But we haven't given sufficient attention to what's right with people. So Seligman asked psychologists and researchers to focus instead on the bottom 15% of people in terms of well-being, on the top 15%. The people who are really flourishing, the people who bounce out of bed in the morning and go, another beautiful, I mean, it sounds irritating, doesn't it? Another beautiful day, but people whose lives seem to be going really well. And he said, let's look at what they do. Let's look at the strategies that those people use. And let's see if there's an evidence base behind it and if we can replicate any of those actions. And if we can do that successfully, then we can move the whole population up. And that was, if you remember, I said I was worried about the focus on mental ill health because it can be disempowering. You know, if you're told, you know, this person has got anxiety or depression, they need specialist help, there's a huge waiting list, the counsellors, you can feel like there's not much you can do. And you're worried maybe about making things worse. But with positive psychology, there's so much that you can do. And so, I mean, I could explain one of the simple models, if you like, just to give an idea.
Yeah.
So the PERMA model is what Martin Seligman came up with originally. And to be honest, when he came up with it, there wasn't much evidence behind it, but there is now. So his strategy, PERMA, and then later Michelle McQuaid and Peggy Kern added an H to that, which I'll talk about as well. But the P stands for positive emotions. So positive emotions help your well-being when you experience them, but they also help your well-being in retrospect when you remember things that you enjoyed. And they help your well-being by looking forward to future positive things. I can do a little exercise with you now if you're up for it.
Oh, yeah, please. Yeah, go for it. Yeah. This is exciting.
Okay. So one of the top PERMA exercises, the one that a lot of people know, is called 3 Good Things. And I'd like you to think back over your last week and think about 3 good things in your life that have happened to you.
They might not be major, but they could be minor as well, can't they? Just as long as they're positive, I would have thought.
Absolutely. I'm going to tell you one of mine, which is...
Oh, yeah, please, yeah.
Sorry, go on.
No, please, yeah, tell me one of yours, and then I'll tell you mine.
It can be something as simple as having a really nice cup of coffee. So I'm showing you my cup of coffee in front of me.
Brilliant.
Nice, warm, tasty cup of coffee. That can be as good a thing. That can be one of them, even that simple. So sorry to interrupt, but you go on and tell me.
Yeah, okay. That makes me feel better. I know exactly what to say now. Basically, it was nice to catch up with family in the long weekend just gone. And it was, you know, sort of family, my nephew, my nieces, etc. And catch up with friends. Also had some really good gym sessions. I was really happy about that. Just really kind of developing my workout and my exercise regime. And also it's been a good working week. I've you know, organised, things are moving through nicely with everything. So yeah, I mean, things are actually going really well. And they're my 3 positives that would be for this week, basically.
Brilliant, thank you. And I'm going to take it a little bit further and say, could you name the emotions? So those feelings that you had when you were with your family and your friends, can you give me some names for them?
I felt like a positive high. I don't know. I suppose that's the only way to describe it. It's a really good question you pose, because I've never been asked that question before. And you know, you're at that time, you're feeling, you know, like good and all the rest of it. But then when you try verbalizing how you're feeling, it's quite interesting. It's quite challenging, isn't it? But I think that was really good. I think the gym workout, endorphins being released, and just getting again a real natural high, a real good feeling that, oh, this is all going right. My body's good in sync. I got to a nice place where I was relaxed as well afterwards. And work-wise, I was just feeling really good. I don't know how to describe. I don't know how to describe it more than that. Just like, yeah, this is all working out nicely. Everything's working out nicely this week. That kind of thing.
Brilliant. And thank you for sharing that. That thing that you're
It's okay.
talking about of finding the words is really common, and especially with our younger people. So naming those emotions, if I were naming the emotions when I'm with my family, I might say I might feel loving, I might feel relaxed. You talked about a high. So is it an excited high? Are you feeling excited, or are you feeling elated, or what kind of a high?
Yeah, I think just to see the family again, because I see them once a week or every couple of weeks. I see them, and so it's nice to just catch up with them. And I think that's an excited mood, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
The working out as an exercise, I think that's a different level. I think it's more elated. It's a higher high. I don't know how to explain because you're putting your body through some pressure, but then you're pulling through it as well, and you're like, yeah, I can do that.
Yeah.
Um, one just something I just remembered now during my workout. I did my workout and I went to the steam room, sauna, and all the rest of it. And there's like a cold plunge pool type thing, and it's freezing. I mean, it's ice cold. And the last few months I've been thinking, right, I'm going to do that. I'm going to do that. And I did it last week, and I saw it. I thought, you know what, I'm going to do it. And I did it. And I was like, oh, brilliant. I did it because I didn't think I'd be able to do it because it was freezing. I mean, really cold. I can't explain how cold it was. I only got out after maybe just 1 minute, but I did it basically. So there's like an achievement. It's like an objective that I fulfilled, even if it might not sound like a lot. But for me, because it really is cold, you know.
And so that sounded like it also needed courage and determination.
Yes, I like those
Yeah.
words. I like those words a lot. I like you. You've done this before, haven't you?
Once or twice. And then those feelings, with feeling organized in work, that's also achievement. And that might also be determination. But there's a different feeling to the way
Yeah.
you told me about it.
Yeah, satisfaction. I got I work in social services, so there's a lot of pressure. There's a lot of stuff going on. So when you're helping people move along through their cases or whatever it might be, there's satisfaction because you're now helping another human being, to make sure they're safe and all the rest of it. So you can't get too excited. The emotions need to be controlled because you're trying to help someone, and it's different. It's very different. And you know what I mean. You know when you're helping people, you've got to stay on the level. Whereas if you're doing
Yeah.
exercise, you can let yourself go, and you see family. You can have a chat and just share what's been happening in the week or whatever it might be. So it's different, isn't it? I think it varies depending on what you're talking about and the context.
Yeah. And that seems to be calmer, but also I can see your face when you're saying that. You've got such a sense of purpose.
Yeah,
And
I like that word as well. I wish I thought of these words, but you've given it to me now, Ruth. So I'm going to keep them. But yeah, you're right. 100%. I think definitely 100%, 110%. There's some purpose behind that because I think it's I partly do. I do. This is my own theory. I do think it's kind of in our DNA that when and you're going to understand this because you do help people yourself. So when you do help people, I think there's a natural feeling of that's what I should be doing, kind of thing. And that might not happen with everybody, but I do think when you do help people, people do get a sense of satisfaction from, I did that, I helped that person out, and all the rest of it. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, totally. And that relates to something we'll come back to in the PERMA model, because the first word was, we've only got as far as P, which is positive emotions, but I'll run through them quickly now. They're going to be positive emotions, engagement, relationships or relatedness, meaning, accomplishment or achievement, and health and exercise. But that meaning, which Martin Seligman came up with all those years ago, I heard him speak just at the end of last year. And he now looks at the meaning as mattering. And what we do in the world that matters, he feels is the most important part of meaning. So when he was speaking, he was saying, well, if he was going to do the PERMA model now, that M would stand for mattering rather than meaning. And that's what you've just described, that feeling that what you do matters and makes a difference to people.
That's perfect, Ruth. On that note, we have to go to a quick ad break. I've been running past the times. And we'll just go to a quick ad break and we'll be right back.
UK Health Radio, the station that makes you feel good. UK Health Radio, the station that makes you feel good.
So, Ruth, you were talking about different models.
Yes.
And I know, and I, there are other questions I want to ask you, but I'm really intrigued about some of the other models, and I'm sure our listeners will be as well. We covered one model. Is there another popular model you can cover with us before we move on?
I can, yeah. I'm not sure how popular it is, but I can share the models that I use in my own life.
Yeah.
And so one that I came across a couple of years ago is David Rock's 2008 scarf model. Scarf like the scarf I'm wearing around my neck, SCARF. And I found that hugely helpful in helping people understand themselves. So a lot of what I do is about raising self-awareness. Why do we react as we do? But also it really helped me understand how I react. So you know the threat response when your heart races, your palms sweat, and so you've probably heard of freeze or fight or flight
Yes.
as a response. Yeah?
Yes.
You either keep still or you want to get aggressive or you want to run away. When your brain's limbic system kicks in, when you're under threat. So what Rock proposed was that there are 5 central pillars of identity that all of us have. And that when we are threatened, the hormones that are released go into that limbic part of the brain to cause a threat response. But contrarily, when those elements are boosted, then the hormones that are released are in our frontal cortex, which is the part of the brain responsible for creativity, for learning, and for solving problems. So it was such an important thing for me to learn. If I talk about those elements, the first one is status. So if someone puts you down, if your status feels threatened, you go into threat mode and you cannot think. So, if somebody was angry with an employee and they were shouting at them, they would make it impossible for them to do what they were being asked to because they've been put straight into threat response. So status is one. Certainty is another one. Do we know what we're doing? Do we have the tools and the strategies to deal with that situation? And that one comes up all the time in my work where people are changing, starting a new career, going into university, starting academia, where you're not sure of what it is you're doing. The third one is autonomy. How much control do you have over what you're doing? And then the R is relatedness. Remember, that ties back to our PERMA model. And then the F is fairness. So when those things happen to us, if you think, oh, this isn't fair, immediately you're in threat mode. If you're not relating well to people, if you feel they're not connecting with you, that can put you in threat mode. Autonomy, if you haven't got control over what you're doing. Certainty, if you don't know what's going on. And then back to status. And so the way that that's helped me personally is when something happens to me, I get stuck in traffic or somebody's mean to me, I just think, which of those things has been my trigger? Okay, it's status. Somebody's treated me in a way that, I feel is disrespectful. And when I recognize what it is that's going on with me, it can, especially if it's me feeling status, I use that as an example, being self-reflective, because I work with students some of the time. And then I think, actually, just stop it, Ruth. Let that go. It's not important here. What is needed to help this person in this moment? What do they need? And then I flip it back on itself, because normally when people behave in an aggressive or a hostile or dismissive way, it's because one of their elements of scarf has been activated and they're trying to assert safety. So that psychological safety in the situation. And so if I can think, what do they need? Do they need status? Am I showing enough respect to them? Do they need certainty? Are they not clear on what's going on here? Do they need autonomy? Am I telling someone what to do rather than offering them choices and options with an agreed goal? Relatedness. Am I being kind? Am I relating to this person human to human? And fairness. Am I being fair? And even if I am doing all of those things, are they seeing that, perceiving it? And how can we work together to get those elements balanced? So and with my coachees, quite often, you'll have someone come with a situation that they're stuck on, because they're saying it's this person's behavior, this is what they're doing, and this situation can't go right until they stop it. And we have no control over other people's behavior. The only thing we can do is look at our own. So that's what I quite often work at, is sort of say, okay, let's have a think about how what we do might help their scarf pillars. What can we do to change our behavior that helps them feel safe? And you asked me about models. The Tim Clark's 4 steps of psychological safety is another brilliant model in any situation, particularly work situations. Have you got the safety to belong, to be who you are? Have you got the safety to learn? Is it okay to make mistakes? Have you got the safety to contribute, to make your own suggestions? Have you got the safety to challenge and actually be taken seriously? So these models fit in one to the other, and having that psychological underpinning and the knowledge of models can really help people explore their situations and take power into the areas that they can control and set achievable goals. Achievement in the PERMA model, you talked about that feeling of facing icy water and then making those steps, making it happen. And how did you feel at the end of that, Gavin?
I just felt really good. I felt very, very good. I don't know. It was weird because I'd seen it quite a few times, and people that jump in it, you can see they're breathing really heavily because it is freezing. I mean, it's ice freezing cold. And I've seen it on TV when people do it as well. And so I'm thinking, oh gosh, how am I going to do that? Because I've never really done it before. And so I went I did a bit of a workout anyway, did a swim. Then I went in the steam sauna and I looked at it and I was like, right, I'm going to do this. And I did it. And I didn't know how I'd react. And it was honestly, I can't explain how cold it was, but I did it. I got out and I was so happy. And even a few days later when I went back to the gym, I didn't do it again, but I saw it and I felt good because I achieved that. And I did say to myself over the last few months, I'm going to do that. I'm not sure at what point, but I'm going to do it. And I did it. Because you know what I mean? Like putting your body underneath that level of pressure, either whether it's extreme cold or extreme heat, it's a bit of a challenge. Do you know what I mean? So yeah, that's kind of what I went through for the last couple of months leading up to last weekend. I know it sounds, it doesn't sound like a lot, but for me, I think in my own mind, when you can challenge yourself. I think part of it was I challenged myself and I overcame. So there is that element as well. So I don't think it was just the cold water scenario. It was the ice bath, whatever it is. It was the fact that I put, there was an objective, an aim, and I fulfilled it. And so I think psychologically it helps build confidence generally if you go on to do other things, if that makes sense.
Brilliant. And that was the bit I was coming on next. So what you set yourself an achievable goal, you achieved it, but you're going to be able to use that experience going forward. So the next challenge you set yourself, you're going to think, what strategies did I use that day psychologically or physically to get me into the water that I wanted to? And you're going to be able to use those again. And I'll tell you something else. I said about the positive emotions working in the past. You had the biggest grin on your face when you were telling me about that story. And I'd like you to just tell me, how do you feel? You told me how you felt then, but how does it feel now telling me about that story?
It felt even better. And I don't, because there's reflection. Because in your own mind, and I'm sure you get this with your own clients that you work with. Something happens, and in your own mind, you're really happy, you're satisfied, but you're on your own kind of thing. You're thinking about yourself. It's a self-achievement, and I haven't spoken to anyone about this. You're the only person that I actually spoke to about this now, because it was something personal to me that I set myself, and basically. When you asked me early on, and I was thinking of the three things, it definitely came up, obviously. And now that I've kind of gone through the motions of everything that happened, it feels even better.
Yeah. So remembering those things and that exercise, those three good things, it's something I definitely recommend families to do together, because human beings, we've got a negativity bias. If I ask how your day is, you probably go, oh, this happened and that went wrong. And because that's what we as humans tend to do. But if you say, tell me three good things that happened to you today, if you get in the habit of doing that with your family, you're automatically scanning for the positive in your day. And you're sharing that. And if you've got young people at home, you're teaching them those strategies. And then you've got the joy of hearing about, honestly, I also feel happier having seen your joy.
Thank you, Ruth.
So you've improved my well-being as well. And some people, if they don't have a family at home to share with, or even if they just prefer, they write the things down at the end of the day. So really good habit to get into. Write down three good things that happened to you in that day, and also write about why they happened.
Like a journal? Like a journal?
Like a journal. Lots of people keep gratitude journals.
Yes, I know.
Gratitude, yeah. It's one way of doing it, but I've just got half a mind to be a little bit careful with gratitude, because if somebody has depression, for example, or they're in a very negative mindset, or something terrible has happened to them if they've just had a bereavement, and you say, oh, why don't you keep a gratitude journal? Then that can be really, really hard, because at that point they don't feel grateful for anything, and it can tip people further towards negativity.
Yeah, no, that's fair enough.
Yeah. So I would say gratitude works brilliantly for lots of people, but not for everybody. But three good things, even if I don't feel happy in my life, I can still appreciate a really nice cup of coffee.
Which is brilliant.
Yeah, I can appreciate that the sun came out. Even if I don't feel it was good for me, I can objectively say that was a good thing. That was a good thing for my garden. It's even a good thing for the garden that it rained. So you can find a good thing when you might not be able to find a thing that you're grateful for. And that's why I tend to use the three good things exercise rather than three things to be grateful for. That's just me.
And it works really, really well. And we're just going to another quick ad break, and we'll be right back.
UK Health Radio, the station that makes you feel good. The station that makes you feel good.
So, Ruth, what kind of people do you help? Like maybe what scenarios might come up?
I get a lot of people who've just changed jobs coming to me for coaching. So especially, it's not all women, but especially women who've just been promoted. So people who've been colleagues, and then suddenly they're the boss, because that involves a huge identity change. And, they want to be friends with their colleagues, but then they don't really understand how to work out asking for things to happen and assuming the identity of a leader. So people who've been promoted into leadership positions. And then I think a lot of people want to work on their relationships with their boss themselves. So that's one group I work with. I also work with a lot of people with international teams. So understanding culture shock, understanding different cultural values and how to work with people whose view on the world is very different to their view on the world. Now, there's a very famous quote, the map is not the territory. It's been attributed to Kaczynski and to various other people. I think I've also heard it attributed to Chomsky. But, people's views of reality are impacted by culture, by upbringing, by values, by beliefs. And we perceive our view of the world as reality when in fact it isn't. It's a subjective experience. And so a lot of the work that I do is with helping people to recognize and to become more self-aware about their own experience, but also really trying to take a perspective view of other people's behaviors, because very few people set out with the intention to do harm or cause problems. Mostly people are doing the very best they can with the tools that they have. And so understanding what strengths are in the behaviors of people around you and how you can use models like SCARF to help support them in what they need, and then they can help you in what you need. These are the kinds of things that I work with day to day.
I know you've mentioned culture shock quite a few times. Could you talk to us a bit more detail about that aspect?
Yeah, absolutely. So culture shock is what happens when you move from one familiar environment into an unfamiliar environment. And again, there's lots of models that you could look at. Lewin's model of change, I really like. It's very simple. It's kind of a 3-stage model of change. It says you have to unbecome what you were. And then you have to be in this liminal period of not knowing. And you have a clear vision of what you're going to become. So lots of the people go straight into trying to be what they need to be in the new situation. But there's a psychological process of unlearning and actually of grieving for the loss of what you had before in order to be able to let it go. And then really understanding the situation that you're in before you crystallize your view of what you want to be in that new situation. So, when we're talking about international culture shock, there's a W curve, and you start off often, especially if you chose the change. There are different dynamics if change is forced upon you. But if you, for example, decided to move to a different country, you'd probably initially be really happy and excited. Everything's new, the weather's amazing, the food's amazing. And then it starts to wear off. And you kind of think, I miss, my family's cooking, and actually the weather here's not so great. And
the honeymoon period ends.
That's exactly right. And normally that coincides with becoming more aware of what you don't know. So in a learning environment, you might say, when you go into a new situation, you are unconsciously incompetent. You don't know what you don't know. And then when you've been there a while, you start to know what you don't know. You become consciously incompetent. And that's the bit that feels really awful for people. You know, the bit where you've gone into this new job and you've been full of high hopes and then suddenly you're not sure that your skills and your experience has prepared you properly for this. You're not sure whether you can cope. And you're suddenly aware of all the things you didn't know you'd have to do and deal with. And that's the bit where people leave. They've been in a new job for maybe 6 months and they think, oh, this isn't for me. Or in a new country, or if students go to study, they think, oh, this course is not for me. Even worse, they turn on themselves. And so they think, I'm really anxious all the time. I have anxiety. I'm really sad. I have depression. But actually, if you're dealing with stuff you've never dealt with before, then feeling anxious is a normal human response. If you're missing people you love, if you're missing the familiar, then sadness is a normal human response. And so having the perspective to say, yeah, actually, this is what happens at this point. And most people get through this. And hey, let's throw in some positive psychology strategies to help us feel a bit better, to improve our well-being. And you can start to climb up the other side of that U in the first bit of the W curve. And some people, I've literally, they've gone, my life's falling apart. I've made this decision. It was the wrong decision. And I've shown them a visual image of the W curve, and they've gone, oh, what? This isn't just me. This happens to other people. Now, the first research into this was done in 1950, and it's been pretty well substantiated ever since. Yeah, it's a human response to change. And so that's what culture shock, when I started out from an educational perspective, I had quite a narrow view of culture shock. I thought it was about people changing countries, and those were the people that I was working with. But since then, I've really come to understand we experience little culture shocks all the time. Changing a job is a culture shock. Approaching retirement and then entering retirement is a culture shock. Going to university, going to secondary school is a culture shock,
To put it simply, it's a change.
Right.
That's what it sounds like to me.
Yeah, and it's our understanding of that change, the story we tell ourselves. People quite often, they're quite judgmental. I'm talking about myself in this as well. I'm not saying other people are. All of us can be really judgmental. So something happens and we go, is this good or is this bad? But that's not the question to ask. So rather than go, oh, so-and-so did this, it's really awful. Or so-and-so did this, it's really brilliant. It's so-and-so did this. How helpful is that in terms of where we want to be, either them or us? So if you go into a new job and you don't understand what was required in the report, and you're told, no, that was the wrong thing, you might go home and beat yourself up mentally and go, oh, this is awful. I didn't know what I was supposed to do. I look like an idiot. All those elements of scarf, your status has gone, all of those things, you feel relatedness has gone. If instead you said, okay, this has happened, I didn't understand what to do. What is the most helpful way for me to respond now? I'm going to really try and understand what is required from these reports. The feedback I've got is really useful. Instead of beating myself up about it, let me understand it. Who can I turn to for further help? And then you make that connection. What steps do I need to take now to improve this situation? And suddenly you've gone from saying this is bad to saying, what can I learn from this? What are my next steps towards where I want to be? And that's the work I do.
Which is brilliant. And we've run out of time, unfortunately. I think I only asked like 2 questions throughout the whole interview because it's so interesting what you've been saying. Where can people find you, Ruth, if they need more advice or they want to use your services or anything like that?
Sure, thank you. So you could email me, office at curious-human.co.uk. So that's my email address. Really happy to have a chat with anybody if they're interested in working with me or finding out more, or they can go to my website, which is curious-human.co.uk, and get in contact with me that way.
Ruth, brilliant. You've been a star. It's been very interesting. I've really enjoyed it. And thank you to our listeners. You know, you can find me at GavinJ417. Until next time, take care.